They said I was too old to speak, too fragile to fight, too irrelevant to matter. So when they took over my husband's funeral and told me to sit quietly in the corner, they had no idea I had something far louder than a voice. I had the will, and I wasn't going to whisper anymore. I never thought I'd have to fight for the right to grieve. But there I was, sitting on the far end of the front pew at my husband Henry's funeral, like I was some distant relative. My hands were folded tight in my lap, but they wouldn't stop trembling, not from sadness. From rage. It wasn't supposed to be this way. We had built this life together. The house, the family, the Sunday dinners, the garden out back. For over 50 years I was Henry's partner in everything. But after he passed, it was like the children I raised decided I'd already passed with him, especially Diane, my oldest. She waltzed in the morning. Henry died, took my phone from my hand, and told the nurses, "I'll handle the arrangements." Just like that. I didn't argue. I was still in shock. I thought maybe she was trying to help, but it didn't take long to realize she wasn't helping. She was taking over. Within a day, she had organized the service, picked out the casket, even chosen what I would wear without asking me. Soft lavender. "It hides your tiredness," she said like I was some antique doll she was dressing for display. She didn't ask me what Henry would have wanted, and she certainly didn't ask what I wanted. Because in her eyes, my job was to stay quiet and look grateful. And at the funeral, when I reached for the program, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Diane had listed herself and her husband Mark as hosts of the memorial. Not once did it say beloved wife. Not once did it mention me. It was like I had been erased. The pastor, a man I barely knew, opened with a prayer that sounded like it came from a pamphlet. Not a single story about Henry's love for jazz, or how he couldn't mow the lawn without humming Duke Ellington. No one had asked me about the life we built. They just decided I didn't matter, that I should sit, nod, and disappear like some faded photograph in a dusty frame. Then came the part that broke me. Diane stood at the podium, wearing a black designer dress, like she was accepting an award. She cleared her throat and smiled at the crowd. A perfect politician. "My father was a great man," she began, voice steady. "He taught me strength, work ethic, and how to never settle." That much was true. Henry was a great man. But then she continued, "And when he became ill, he told me he trusted me to handle everything." That was a lie. Henry never said that. He told me right there in his hospital bed that he wanted everything to go to his family, to me, and then divided fairly. He made me promise to keep it all honest. And I did. But Diane made it sound like Henry handed her the throne. She ended her speech with, "I'm proud to carry on his legacy, the business, the estate, and the values he stood for." The business? The estate? Henry had never signed over a single thing to her. That's when I remembered something he'd handed me, weeks before he passed. Something small, folded and sealed in a manila envelope. His voice was weak when he gave it to me, but his eyes were sharp. "Don't let them push you out, Nora," he whispered. "When the time comes, you speak." And then, as Diane stepped down and the pastor announced a moment of silence, I felt something shift in my chest, like a door that had been shut for weeks finally creaked open. I stood, people turned. Even the pastor froze. But I wasn't trembling anymore. I walked slowly to the front, heels clicking against the wooden floor. The room was so quiet you could have heard a tear fall. Diane's mouth tightened. I reached the podium, placed both hands on either side of it, and looked out over the room. Neighbors, friends, relatives, faces that had shared holidays and barbecues with us, faces that deserved the truth. "I won't stay silent," I said. A few gasps. "My name is Nora Caldwell. I was Henry's wife for 53 years. And I have something to say." I saw Diane step forward, but I held up a hand. "No, Diane. You've said enough. I told them about our life. The real Henry. The man who snuck pie into my hospital room after I had a hip replacement. The man who danced with me in the garage during a blackout. The man who gave his heart to this family. Not for applause, but because he loved us. And I told them about the will. Gasps again. I have it, right here. Henry's final words. Written and signed with 2 witnesses. He wanted the truth preserved. I didn't open it then. I didn't need to, because what mattered in that moment was reclaiming my voice. Diane stood frozen, red-faced, gripping the back of a chair. Her husband Mark looked like he wanted to disappear, and me, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my room with the will in my lap, rereading it by the yellow light of my old bedside lamp. Everything Henry promised was written right there. He had left the house to me, the business in trust, until I decided what to do with it, and instructions that everything else be divided fairly, only after I was taken care of. He knew Diane would try to take control. That's why he'd put protections in place, and that's why he trusted me to make sure the truth came out. I looked out the window into the dark yard. The garden was still there, the windmill still spinning slowly. They told me to sit down and be quiet, but they forgot one very important thing. I wasn't just the widow, I was the woman who helped build the empire. And now I had the microphone and the will. I don't sleep that night. I lie in the same bed I shared with Henry for over 40 years. The space beside me so cold it might as well be the North Pole. I can still smell his aftershave on the pillow, that faint woodsy scent he never gave up. No matter how many fancy department store colognes our daughter tried to buy him, he liked things simple, dependable, just like he liked me. But what happened at that podium, that wasn't simple. That was a choice, and not just by my daughter. It was a decision made by everyone in that chapel who saw me standing there, confused, heartbroken, and said nothing, who sat in silence while Linda waved me off with a tight-lipped smile like I was an old waitress interrupting their dinner. You've said enough, Mom, she'd hit. Had I? Because now I couldn't stop thinking of everything I hadn't said. Everything I'd kept bottled up all these years. I thought staying quiet was a form of love. Turns out it was just another way they erased me. The next morning I sit at the kitchen table with my lukewarm coffee untouched. My cardigan sleeves hang past my wrists, and my hands tremble when I try to steady the cup. Not from age, but from restraint. I feel like a dam about to burst. Linda walks in like she owns the place. Her heels click across the hardwood and she starts opening cabinets like she's inventorying a house that's already hers. You should eat something, she says without looking at me. People expect you to fall apart. Let them. We'll take care of everything. Take care, like I'm a potted plant someone waters out of obligation. I'm not an invalid, Linda. She sighs. Loudly. I didn't say you were. Then she pulls out a legal pad. A thick stack of forms tucked underneath it. I talked to the attorney, she says. He said we should begin sorting things sooner rather than later. Henry didn't leave a formal will. I look up so sharply she stops mid-sentence. Didn't he? Linda frowns. What? I push the chair back and rise slowly. My joints groan, but my spine is straight. I walk to the hallway closet and pull down the metal lockbox. Henry and I always kept on the top shelf. The key still hangs from the chain I wear around my neck. He made me promise to guard it like gold, because it was gold. The life we built, the home we earned, the words we chose together. I unlock the box and carry it back to the table. You might want to sit down, I tell her. She does, reluctantly. I open the box and pull out the manila envelope labeled in Henry's handwriting. to be opened upon my passing. Linda snatches it from my hand, but her face drops when she reads the first line. This is notarized, she whispers, and signed by both of us. 7 years ago. She flips pages, her lips purse tighter with each sentence. Why didn't I know about this? She snaps. Because it wasn't yours to know, I reply. That's when her husband Matt walks in, coffee in hand, Bluetooth still in one ear like he's one call away from selling the house under me. What's going on? Linda holds up the will. Apparently Henry did leave a will. Mom just didn't tell us. I correct her gently. No, I just didn't tell you. The lawyer knew. The document's valid. Matt scoffs. Well, it'll need to be reviewed. This doesn't change how things are handled now. I stare at the man who once called me mom before he knew my daughter would treat me like dead weight. Now he acts like I'm the help who overstayed her welcome. Doesn't it? I say, my voice even. Because this will names me the sole executor. It gives me full rights to the estate, the house, the assets, the savings. Linda's jaw clenches. That's not fair. I tilt my head. Fair? You mean like stealing the microphone from your grieving mother at her husband's funeral? Matt steps forward. Listen. We were just trying to keep things from getting messy. I laugh. A short, bitter sound. You didn't want messy? Then maybe you shouldn't have treated your father's death like a business seminar. Linda rises now, voice climbing. You think this house is some shrine to your love story? Dad built his life for us too. We were part of that. Then why was I the only one beside him when the machine started beeping? I snap. Where were you, Linda? The room goes quiet. Even Matt has the decency to look away. I don't want to keep fighting. I really don't. But for the first time in years, I'm done swallowing my voice. I won't disappear in my own home. Not again. After they leave, Matt muttering about calling their own attorney, Linda storming out with her designer purse. I finally breathe. I sit back down and open the rest of the envelope. Inside is a note I forgot was there. A short handwritten letter from Henry. It's not long, just a few lines. If they ever treat you like you're not part of the story, remind them who wrote the first chapter. I press the paper to my chest. Oh, Henry, you always did know exactly what to say. That afternoon, I make my own calls. Not to lawyers, but to friends. Old friends from the community center. From church. From the library where I used to read aloud to kids. I ask about upcoming meetings, about events where people gather. I even call the church secretary and offer to host the next family loss support session. Would you be willing to share your story? She asks. I smile. I think it's time. Not out of revenge, not yet. But out of principle. Because I've been quiet for far too long. And it's not just my family that needs to hear the truth. It's everyone who's ever been pushed aside, silenced, or told to make room while someone louder took the credit. I go to my closet and pick out my best blouse, iron it, lay it across the bed. I'm going to be seen, not as someone's mother, not as a poor widow, but as a woman with something to say. And next Sunday when I take the mic again, it won't be to eulogize. It will be to declare. This chapter isn't ending. It's beginning. And I've got a will in one hand and a microphone in the other. Let's see who tells me to stay quiet now. You'd be surprised how hard it is to speak up when everyone you love has trained you to stay silent. I always thought of myself as quiet, not weak. There's a difference. I chose peace. I chose calm. I chose love over conflict. But now I realize that choosing peace too many times Lets people think you have nothing worth saying, and that's the most dangerous lie you can tell yourself. It's Sunday morning, the same church I've attended for 46 years. The pews are polished. The air smells like old hymn books and lemon wood polish. Sunlight streaks through the stained glass windows, coloring the carpet with blues and purples. It's beautiful. But today it doesn't comfort me like it used to, because I know what I'm about to do won't sit well with everyone here. But I'm not here for everyone anymore. I sit in the front row, holding Henry's will in my purse like a loaded weapon. And in a way, it is just not the kind that destroys, the kind that protects, the kind that says, "This is my place. I earned it. You will not erase me." The pastor speaks kindly. He always liked Henry, called him the backbone of the church. He says something about grief not being a straight line. He says the Lord hears even the quietest hearts. But what if mine is tired of being quiet? When the service ends, they begin to open the floor for testimonies, just like they do every month. People stepping up to share blessings, struggles, prayers. Normally I'd sit back, but today I stand. My knees shake a little as I walk to the microphone. I don't look at my daughter sitting halfway back with her arms crossed, or Matt whispering something into his phone like it's more important than anything happening here. I look at the pastor, and he nods. I clear my throat. My name is Eleanor Thomas. Most of you know me. Some of you might only remember me as Henry's wife. But I've come to say something today, not just as his widow, but as myself. The microphone picks up the tremor in my voice, but I don't care. I let it tremble. That's part of the truth, too. I've spent years in this church, volunteering, cooking meals, folding bulletins. I did it quietly, because I thought that's what love looked like. But love, real love, it stands up. I hear a few murmurs in the pews. I press on. When my husband passed, I wasn't allowed to speak at his funeral. My own daughter told me to sit down, and I did, because I thought it would hurt more to fight. Now the murmurs grow. People shift in their seats. But that silence took something from me, and I think too many of us have been taught to do the same, to sit quietly while others rewrite the stories we lived. I can't help it. My voice breaks, just for a second, then I find it again. I was there for every part of Henry's life, from the time he built our first bookshelf by hand, to the moment he took his last breath, holding my hand. I am not just the woman who served coffee at events. I am the woman who held a family together. Someone claps, just one person at first, then another. I know. So if you've ever been told to be quiet, if you've ever been pushed out of your own story, take the mic, speak, because no one gets to tell your story but you. I step back, and for the first time in months, I feel seen. The pastor walks over, puts a gentle hand on my shoulder and says into the mic, "Thank you, Eleanor." That took courage. I go back to my seat. My hands are trembling, but my spine is straighter than ever. Linda won't meet my eyes. Matt is typing on his phone, pretending none of this happened, but I don't need their validation anymore. That night, I sit at the kitchen table again. But this time, I'm not just thinking, I'm planning, because speaking up is only the beginning. I pull out the will again. I review every clause Henry and I included: the house, the land, the accounts. It's all here. Signed, dated, notarized, and all in my name. I flip the page. That's when I remember something Henry added last minute. Something even Linda doesn't know about. The name of a second executor. A backup. It's not Linda. It's not Matt. It's an old friend of ours, Charles Wilkin, a retired attorney who once helped Henry through a property dispute years ago. A man who knows exactly how to make paperwork work in your favor. I pick up the phone. Charles, I ask when he picks up. "It's Eleanor. I think it's time we go over the documents." There's a pause, then a warm chuckle. "I was wondering when you'd call." We make plans to meet at his office the next day. By Tuesday morning, the wheels are turning. Charles walks me through everything. patiently, kindly. He doesn't treat me like I'm fragile. He treats me like someone who's capable, which I am. We go over the property rights, the deed, the living trust accounts. It's all solid, Charles says, flipping through the files. You and Henry did everything right. If they try to fight this, they'll lose. Good, I say. Because they've already taken enough. Charles leans back. What do you want to do now? I look out the window. I see the same street Henry and I moved into 50 years ago. We built our life here, raised a family, weathered storms, and now our own child thinks she can walk in and take it like a prize. No. No, I'm not letting that happen. I turn back to Charles, my voice steady, clear. I want to take my house back. When I return home that evening, Linda's car is in the driveway again. She's in the kitchen, opening mail that isn't hers. Matt is in the den, feet up, remote in hand, like this is his house now. I walk in, set my purse down, and say we need to talk. Linda doesn't even look up. If this is about your little church performance. No, I say, firm. This is about the will. Now she looks, and when I hand her the official notice with the seal, the attorney signature and the detailed summary of my ownership, her mouth goes dry. This house belongs to me, I say, and so does everything in it. Matt finally speaks. You can't do this. We've lived here for months. You were guests, I say. And now the stay is over. Linda glares at me like I've betrayed her. But betrayal goes both ways. You told me I had no voice, I continue. You silenced me at my husband's funeral. You took over my kitchen, my bedroom, my peace. I pause, letting the words settle. I'm taking them back. When I was younger, I thought silence was strength. I thought if you stayed calm, stayed polite, people would eventually do right by you. I was wrong. Silence only makes room for people to speak over you. And that's exactly what happened. The moment I showed my daughter and her husband the legal documents proving I owned this house. Where did you get this? Linda hissed, flipping through the pages like they were fake. I kept my voice steady. From Henry. He made sure I'd be protected. You didn't know that because you didn't care to ask. Matt stood behind her with that arrogant smirk he always wore when he thought he was the smartest person in the room. You can't evict family. Yes, I can, I said. And this time, my voice had steel in it. And you're not acting like family. You've been treating me like a burden in my own home. Linda slammed the papers down on the kitchen table. Do you have any idea how selfish you sound? We gave up our apartment to move in here and help you. Help me? I laughed, not kindly. You threw out my privacy, my belongings, and my voice. You didn't help me. You moved in like you owned the place. Matt crossed his arms. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You made the mistake when you told me to stay out of the way. You forgot this is my house. Henry and I built this together, and he trusted me to protect it. I walked out of the kitchen, my spine straight, my heart pounding. That night, they sulked like teenagers, slamming doors, whispering loudly just so I could hear, but I didn't waver. I called Charles the next morning. They're still here, I told him, and they're not going quietly. He didn't sound surprised. We'll file a formal notice. You've given them verbal warning. Now it's time for written. 2 days later, the official notice arrived, sealed and signed. I placed it gently on the kitchen counter between the coffee pot and the microwave, right where Linda would see it first thing. When she did, she snapped. You're seriously kicking us out, she shouted across the living room. I'm asking for my space back, I replied. You chose to act like this was yours. Now you can live somewhere else. Matt muttered something under his breath. I heard ungrateful and crazy. That's fine, let them call me names. People call you difficult when you stop letting them walk all over you. By the end of the week, boxes started piling up. They packed angrily like it was punishment. Linda barely looked at me, except to glare. But I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was tired. And finally I was free. When they pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I stood at the front door, alone, but not lonely. Just quiet. And this time, the quiet belonged to me. A few days passed. The house felt lighter, not just because of the empty rooms, but because I could breathe. I made tea in my kitchen, sat in my living room, walked down the hall and shut the door to my bedroom without guilt. I opened the window one morning, the sun pouring in like honey, and realized something. I'd never lived alone. Not really. And instead of fearing it, I started to feel curious. What would it mean to choose for myself again? I started by repainting the guest room, soft sage green, the color Henry always said, reminded him of the mountains where we spent our anniversary that one time. Next, I moved the sewing machine back into the front sunroom. It had been shoved into the attic the day after Linda arrived. I dusted it off, sat down, ran a piece of cotton through the needle. The hum of the machine filled the air like a song I had forgotten. And I smiled. Later that week, I walked into town for the first time in months without rushing. I stopped at the coffee shop where the barista still remembered my name. "Back for your blueberry muffin?" she asked. "Every Monday," I said with a grin. I sat by the window, muffin warm in my hand, watching people walk by. Young, old, couples, friends. And I didn't feel invisible, because now I wasn't hiding. That afternoon, I visited the community center. I'd heard they were opening a spot for a local speaker series. I signed up. The receptionist blinked at me. "You'd like to speak?" I nodded. "About legacy, and voice, and what it means to be heard." They smiled, clearly surprised. "We'd love to have you." The day of the event, I stood in front of a room full of people. Some strangers, some neighbors. I wore the blue floral blouse Henry always said brought out my eyes. My silver gray hair was pinned neatly, my hands resting calmly on the podium. And then I told my story, not just about losing Henry, but about losing myself in the years that followed, about letting people push me aside, about what it took to take the microphone and the will back. And when I finished, they clapped, not because I said something revolutionary, but because I said something true. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She had freckles, wide eyes, and worry all over her face. "My husband says I shouldn't speak up," she whispered. "He says it makes me look emotional." I smiled gently. "Let them think you're emotional," I said. "Your voice is still yours." She squeezed my hand like it meant the world. And I realized it did. Weeks passed. The house became mine again, not just in paperwork, but in spirit. I hosted a book club in the living room. I opened the back patio for weekend tea with old friends. I planted hydrangeas in the front yard, the way Henry always planned to. One evening I sat with my journal on the porch swing and wrote one sentence that made me tear up. I stopped waiting for permission to exist, because I had no one would take that from me again. People in town started noticing. Not because I made a scene. I never raised my voice, never pointed finger. I just showed up with dignity, with stories, and with the kind of peace that makes people uncomfortable if they're used to controlling the conversation. At the grocery store, I bumped into Marcia. She used to be Linda's friend, the kind who only talked to me when she wanted gossip. She raised her eyebrows when she saw me. "I heard they moved out," I smiled. "Yes, they did." She paused. "They said you well that you snapped." I looked her in the eye. No, I remembered who I was. And for once, Marcia didn't have anything clever to say. One evening, while I was watering the front porch plants, a car I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. Linda. She stepped out, arms crossed, sunglasses still on even though the sun was already setting. She looked tired, older than I remembered, like life had been heavier since she left. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. I needed to see it for myself." I didn't move. I just held the watering can at my side. She looked past me at the house. "It's so quiet. It's peaceful," I corrected. She flinched slightly. "Mom, I didn't mean for things to get so ugly. You told me I didn't need privacy," I said softly. "You mocked me, dismissed me, then tried to erase me in my own home." She stepped forward. "I thought I was helping." "No," I said firmly. "You were helping yourself." Her mouth opened, then closed. I placed the watering can down and walked toward her, stopping at the steps. "I forgive you," I said. "But I won't forget." She blinked fast. "So, is this it?" I nodded. "This is me finally choosing myself. You're welcome to grow from this, but you're not welcome to come back and pretend it never happened." For a long second she didn't respond. Then she nodded. Slowly. "Okay." And she left. Not with drama. Not with yelling. Just a quiet understanding between us. Not everything can be healed, but some things can be accepted. That night, I sat with the old will again. The one Henry signed with that steady hand of his, right before he started getting sick. I flipped through the pages, reading his careful words. He'd written a note in the margin of the last page. One I'd missed the first time. "For the woman who carried our family's heart, this is yours. Never let them bury it." Tears fell silently down my cheeks. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because for the first time in years, I finally felt seen. A few days later, the community center invited me to speak again. This time at a panel for local elders who wanted to share their life experiences. I stood beside a retired school principal, a 78-year-old painter, and a woman who lost her husband in Vietnam and never remarried. When it was my turn, I spoke not just about grief, but about reclamation. I didn't lose myself because I was old. I said into the mic, I lost myself because I let people tell me I wasn't needed anymore. And one day, I decided to stop believing that. The room was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning hum. A young girl in the front row, maybe 18, wiped her eyes. An older man in the back clapped slowly, then faster. And soon, the whole room was applauding. Not because I was extraordinary, but because I had survived the ordinary silencing and still chose to speak. That weekend, a reporter from the local paper called. "We heard about your story from the center," she said. "Would you be willing to share it?" At first I hesitated. I didn't want to shame Linda or reopen wounds. But then I thought about every older person still being told to hush, to step aside, to stay in the shadows of their own life. "Yes," I said, "but only if you let me tell it my way." She agreed. The article came out 2 weeks later. "Widow reclaims her voice and her home." They printed my photo, smiling on my porch, hydrangeas blooming behind me. People stopped me at the post office, the bakery, the bank. Some just nodded respectfully. Others whispered thank you. One woman my age squeezed my hand and whispered, "I thought I was the only one." In my kitchen, taped to the fridge, I hung the article beside the old recipe for Henry's favorite pot roast. And every time I walked by, I smiled. Because for years I thought the biggest thing I'd ever done was raise a family. But now I knew the truth. The biggest thing I ever did was stop being small. One quiet Sunday morning, I made a pot of tea, opened my notebook, and wrote down the title of the book I'd been thinking about. The Silence That Raised Me. It wouldn't be a bestseller, but maybe it would be a mirror for someone like me, someone who needed to see herself reflected in more than just wrinkles and sacrifice. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. I never expected the world to care. Not really, but somehow, the story kept traveling. First the local paper, then the state newsletter for senior advocacy. By spring, a podcast for women over 60 had invited me to speak. Tell us what it felt like, the host said, to be erased. I paused on the phone. It felt like disappearing in your own mirror, I answered, but louder, because no one noticed you were gone. She was silent on the other end. Then she whispered, "That's exactly what happened to my mom." We recorded the episode 2 weeks later. I sat in my sunroom. The mic Charles helped me set up sitting between my teacup and an old photo of Henry. The sun warmed my back, and for once, I didn't feel small behind a screen. I felt permanent. Not trendy, not viral, just real. The episode aired with the title, "The Woman Who Took the Mic and the Will." And suddenly, emails began flooding in. Letters too, real letters, handwritten and heartfelt. A woman from Arizona said, "My daughter moved me into her basement and forgot I existed. You reminded me that I have a voice." Another wrote, "I sent your story to my son and told him I'm not done living." Each message wrapped itself around my heart like a second chance. And yet, not all the messages were kind. One email caught me off guard. It was from Matt. Yes, that Matt, Linda's husband. He wrote, "You think this makes you a hero. You're just bitter. You embarrassed your own family for applause. Hope it was worth it." I stared at the screen. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I simply hit delete. Because when you finally claim your power, you stop arguing with people who lost theirs trying to take yours. Later that afternoon, I went into the attic. There was a box I hadn't opened in years, labeled Miss Henry. Inside, some old journals, faded flannel shirts, and a stack of cassette tapes. One was labeled, "If you're reading this without me." My hands trembled now. I dug out an old tape player, popped it in, and pressed play. The sound crackled. Then came his voice, warm, gravelly, and heartbreakingly clear. "Hey, sweetheart. If you're hearing this, I guess I'm not there. But you are. And I need you to know that was enough. You were always enough." I covered my mouth, tears streaming down silently. "I know people will try to quiet you, but you've got thunder in your soul. Don't ever let them call it noise." The tape ended in soft static, and I sat there for what felt like hours. Not sad, not broken, just full. The next week I was invited to speak at a retirement seminar. Not to the retirees, but to their children. "They need to hear this," the coordinator told me, from someone who lived it. So I stood on a stage in front of 30 young adults, some barely older than Linda and Matt, and I told them the truth. That person you call mom or grandma, or the old lady who lives with us, she has decades of wisdom. She has opinions. She has stories. If she's silent, it's not because she has nothing to say. It's because you stopped listening." Some squirmed in their chair. A few looked like they might cry. One young man in a navy sweater raised his hand. "What do I do if I already made her feel invisible?" "Start listening now," I said. "Start today." That night, I sat by the fire pit alone. I poured a glass of sweet tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and watched the stars blink to life. And I thought, how strange that silence used to be my cage. Now it's my freedom. A different kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't ache. The kind that says, "You're home now." The next morning, a letter came in the mail. No return address, just my name, in careful cursive. Inside, a photo. Linda, standing in front of a therapist's office, holding up a card that read, "First step taken." No words. No signature. But I knew it was her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something loosen in my chest. Forgiveness isn't always an open door. Sometimes it's just a window cracked slightly. enough to let in light. I added the photo to my fridge, next to the article, next to the recipe, next to a post-it with 3 words in my handwriting. Say it anyway. That weekend I held a storytelling circle at the library. 10 people came, then 20, then 30. They told stories of lost husbands, forgotten birthdays, voices drowned out by louder ones, and one by one, they passed the mic. And when it got to me, I didn't hesitate. I used to think getting older meant fading out, I said, but now I know age just means you've got more to say. The room clapped. I didn't flinch, because this time, the applause wasn't for drama or rebellion, it was for truth, and I had finally stopped whispering it. It's strange what peace feels like. Not fireworks, not trumpets, not some grand cinematic moment. No, peace comes softly, like the way the porch light flickers on just before dark, or how your name sounds when someone finally says it with kindness. I sit at the kitchen table now, the same one I once scrubbed while others made decisions around me. But this time, there's a binder in front of me, one I created myself, labeled, "The Life I Want, on My Terms." Inside are pages and pages of my own writing notes, memories, essays, speeches, recipes, even old letters I'd forgotten I kept. There's also a printed version of the revised will Henry left me, the real one, the one that was almost buried beneath dust and silence. That will doesn't just give me ownership of this house, it gives me the final word. Linda called again today. It's the 4th time this month. I still let it go to voicemail, but I listen. Today's message is quieter, softer. Mom, I know I can't undo what I said, what we did, but I'm trying. I really am. There's a pause. I can hear her breathe. I bought your cookbook, the one with your stories in the margins. I made the peach cobbler yesterday. Matt said it tasted like home. I didn't even tell him it was your recipe. He just knew. My heart aches. In that good, terrible way. I go outside, still holding my tea, and step onto the porch. The wind is gentle tonight. The crickets sing like they always have. Only now, I hear them. And I smile. Because I'm not just alive. I'm present. A few weeks later, the library hosts a larger event. They call it the Loud Generation. It's for women over 60 who want to reclaim their voice. I'm asked to open the evening. As I walk onto the stage, I scan the crowd. Dozens of women sit there, some holding notebooks, others just looking up with tired hope in their eyes. And in the back corner, arms folded nervously, is Linda. She came. I don't stop. I don't freeze. I used to believe silence was safety. I say. That if I stayed quiet, I'd be loved. That if I didn't rock the boat, I'd stay afloat. I pause, but silence nearly sank me. And when I finally screamed, not out of rage, but out of truth, something amazing happened. The audience leans in. I didn't drown. I soared. They applaud and I look back toward the corner. Linda is crying. And for the first time, I don't feel the need to comfort her. She's grieving something. Yes, but she's also learning. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. After the event, she waits outside the building. I walk past her. She calls softly, "Mom." I stop. She steps forward slowly, holding something in her hand. It's the album, the family photo album I'd taken down years ago, after the fight. She flips it open. Inside are new photos, ones I wasn't in, but taped next to each in her handwriting are sticky notes that read, "This is where you should have been. This one was yours too. I'm sorry we erased you." I don't say anything, not because I'm silencing myself, but because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need a speech. It just needs time. That night, We sit in the living room, me in my lavender cardigan, her in sweats and tear-stained makeup. We don't argue, we don't unpack everything. We just exist. And that's a start. A month later, I published something I never thought I would. My first book. Not a memoir, not a cookbook, not a lecture. A collection of monologues, written by older women across the country who reached out after hearing my story. The title? They told me to stay quiet. So I spoke for all of us. It debuts at number 6 on the local nonfiction list. A theater director reaches out. He wants to adapt it for a stage play. He asks if I'd like to be the closing narrator. I laugh. Me? On stage? He nods. No one else should close the curtain. So I do it. Opening night arrives, my hands shake again. But not from fear, from power. From joy, from everything that silence tried to steal. Returning like a song I forgot I knew. The lights dim. The crowd hushes, and I speak. There's a kind of silence that kills, the kind that wraps around your throat like thread, but there's another kind. The silence of power. The pause before the mic, the breath before truth. That's where I live now. And as the curtain falls, they don't just clap, they stand. Backstage, Linda waits with roses. You're not just my mother, she says. You're my hero. I look at her. I was always both. I reply. Later that week, I update my will. I leave the house to a local shelter for senior women experiencing displacement. I leave my journals to the town's historical society. I leave my cookbook to the library's archive. And I leave the stage open, figuratively and literally, for the next woman brave enough to step onto it. Because I may be done performing, but I'll never be done speaking.